Welcome to Desert Island Discs. I am joined today by the wonderful, beautiful, and very, very talented Greta Brownridge. And I love her dearly, and you'll love her too. She's an amazing woman. She's got two lovely adopted children, and she speaks of really important things. And she's an amazing artist, storyteller, poet, everything, and musician, of course. She plays in a band that I've forgotten the name of, but I'm sure she'll tell us. Welcome, Greta. So,
hello, Angie.
Nobody knows you, so let's just tell them a little bit about you from how you see yourself.
Okay. Well, I grew up in a small place called Glossop, which is kind of a little small villagey type place, which was really nice to grow up in because it's got lots of hills and walks around it. But it wasn't very practical for work life. You know, there's only kind of one small exit in and one small exit out of Glossop. So you can't drive in and drive out very easily at all at rush hour time. And if you can't get to the place by train, you're pretty stuck. So when I got married, I moved to a bit more inner city, you know, so it's a bit more concrete around here. There's a couple of parks to try and make things a bit greener. And I noticed when I first moved here how much green had been around, you know, when I grew up compared to what I've got now. Obviously, you just said we adopted two children. The first one's been home for 10 years and the second one's been home for 5.5 years. I play with Stalybridge old band, a brass band, and I play the soprano cornet.
So we're gonna send you to a desert island, and you're gonna pick 8 tracks that you'd really love to take with you. And can you introduce us to your first one and why you've picked it?
The first one is from my childhood. One of my favourite songs was Nellie the elephant packed her trunk and said goodbye to the circus. And I really kind of loved that one, and it resonated with me because I always used to sing that Nellie the elephant was back to front and not packed her trunk. I thought it said back to front. And I suppose an elephant kind of is back to front because its nose and its tail are virtually interchangeable. So I could understand why it would be logical that it looked like you're back to front. And I'd go around the house singing Nellie the elephant back to front at the top of my voice, and my parents would be saying, it's not back to front, it's back to trunk. And I would not have it at all. I was headstrong, I was stubborn, and that's kind of my base characteristic. I'm still headstrong and stubborn now. And so I think that's why I like the memory of the elephant, you know, and this song, because it's kind of established from an early age what kind of my core character was.
Let's have a listen.
To Bombay, a traveling circus came. They brought an intelligent elephant, and Nellie was her name. One dark night, she slipped her iron chain, and off she ran to Hindustan and was never seen again. Nellie the elephant packed her trunk and said goodbye to the circus. Off she went with a trumpety trump, 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 trump. Nellie the elephant packed her trunk and trundled back to the jungle. Off she went with a trumpety trump, 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 trump.
So tell us a bit about your upbringing.
I suppose upbringing wise, I had a younger brother. He was 3 years younger than me. And I had mum and dad that were married for many, many years. You know, they were married 50 odd years by the time they eventually died. So I had quite a stable, you know, home life. And I lived next door but to my grandparents. So I was around there a lot, you know, and they looked after me, and my grandma used to play school with me and acted out a lot of the children's TV programs like play school. You know, we actually had a real Humpty Dumpty and a Luby Lou, I think it was. And she used to get these tiny cereal boxes, and we'd play shop. And, you know, she was really good at helping me with my imagination. And so, like, you know, I was about Nellie the Elephant. I wanted to run away to a circus. I wanted to be an acrobat. I wanted to be a gymnast. I was always standing on my head. I always had my head between my legs upside down. I think I just looked at the world upside down most of the time. So, but like, you know, like you were saying before, music's always been kind of a core thing with me. And I've always sought out musical instruments. Even my rattle in my pram, I used to shake that in time to my dad playing the organ. He had a full-size organ in his front room, and I'd shake my rattle in time to the music. My granddad had a mouth organ in his sock drawer, so I was always sneaking upstairs to get this mouth organ and try and play on that. And so when I was 8 and I was at school, this kind of leads into the next song now. The next song is going to be Another Brick in the Wall. I learned to play the guitar. And the reason I picked this song is because it was the first kind of pop song that I'd learned to play. I didn't really understand the lyrics, but I like being able to play a pop song because it was, you know, it's kind of a hip thing to do. My interpretation of Another Brick in the Wall was that it was saying I was one of many identical people. And I decided, no, I am definitely not an identical person. I'm going to be different, and I am different. And my guitar teacher at the time, she was only learning to play the guitar herself, so she's only like one step ahead of me. So she'd done the basics of like chords and the tune a day book, and I'd got equal to her standard. So we kind of learned together then, and I started to learn to read music with her and pluck strings. We got better together, and then I went into like the advanced guitar class, and then we got to this Another Brick in the Wall. So that's our next song.
Right, let's have a listen.
We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. No dark sarcasm in the classroom. Teacher, leave them kids alone. Hey, teacher, leave them kids alone. All in all, it's just another brick in the wall. All in all, you're just another brick in the wall.
So you were better than the teacher in the end.
Yeah, in the end I was, yeah.
That's a great thing. And then when did you meet your husband?
I met him when I was 17, and he was 22 then, 5 years older than me. And I was going to work as a YTS in those days. They had a youth training scheme, and it was a job where you were employed by a company, but also had some education at college. So I was learning clerical typing at Sight and Sound College in Manchester, and my placement initially was at Hollywood and Jones, which is a solicitor's office. So I was travelling from Glossop to Manchester on the train, and he got on the train at Hattersley because he lived a bit further up, you know, a couple of stops up from me. He'd seen me. He said to, you know, he'd asked God for a Christian girl with ginger hair and big boobs, and that was me. So I kind of caught his eye. And he kept trying to talk to me and pluck up the courage. And then one day the train was absolutely full, and etiquette says you don't sit next to a person on a 3-seater. You have a person, a gap, and a person. You know, etiquette says no matter if it's full or not, you stand up. You don't sit down in the middle. He came and sat right down in the middle next to me. And all journey he kept asking me, what time is it? Do you know what time it is? Do you know what time it is? And he said he covered his watch up on his hand because he knew that he was trying to pretend he didn't have a watch. And I'm thinking like, well, you know what time it is because the stops are a certain time in the park. You know, by the time you get to Guy Bridge, you're about 15 minutes in. When we're at Ashbridge, you're nearly there, you know. But I knew he was trying to make conversation with me. And he said to me, you know, would you like to go out for you know, meet up at dinner time and stuff? So I said, yeah. So we got off at Manchester together. He was working at a bookshop in Manchester. And I'd forgotten his name already by the time I got off the train because it's just, I didn't know anyone called Richard. So, you know, when you get a new person, if you know someone who's already got that name, you kind of link them up and remember the name from that. I didn't know anyone called Richard at that time. So I said, okay, what was your name again? So we met up at lunchtime and he took me for a McDonald's strawberry milkshake, which I thought was fantastic because I had the large one. So I thought, if nothing else, I've got a large milkshake out of this boy. And then the next day was at a cinema, you know, and all the time in the cinema, he kept trying to put his arm around my chair, you know, to put his arm around me, like you see on the TV. And I kept thinking he didn't know whether to do it or not. And in the end, I just grabbed his arm and put it around me to start put him out of his misery and just put his arm around me. So yeah, I met him when I was 20. I met him when I was 17. We married when I was 21. We're still married now. It's, you know, 35 years or something that we're 30 odd years married, 35 years together.
Wow. And I think this leads, I might be wrong, I'm often wrong, into our next song. But yes, tell us about it.
So we got past the rebellion of the another brick in the wall. Another reason that appealed to me is because of the rebellion, and that's my kind of I'm a rebel, and you know, it just appealed to another thing to my character. But this next song is from Storybook International, and it's a UK opening by Larry Grassman from 1983. So at that time I'd be about 13, and I absolutely loved Storybook International because I'd just got a pen friend and I was getting interested in how differently people live in other countries. Of course, in those days, there was no internet, you know, no smartphones or anything. So it was all pen friend actually writing letters and that took weeks to get there and weeks to come back. So this kind of was giving me an idea of what happened in other countries and how different cultures were. I also love Storybook International because it was tapping into my love of storytelling and story reading. I used to love reading Enid Blyton. Really love the circus ones, not surprisingly, because this boy had got a dog, like a little puppy dog, that he was training to do tricks. What the tightrope and stuff. And I imagined me getting this little puppy dog, training it and running away with the circus as a dog handler. And I also loved Enid Blyton's Tamerlane, the wild animal man who lived in the wild, because I also fancied that, you know, just living on my own somewhere with loads of animals, a bit like, you know, a bit like, is it Snow White that sings to the animals? You know, I could imagine me doing that as well. And I really love the guitar intro on this. Obviously it's a stringed instrument, so that tapped into me that in my guitar playing at that time. And it kind of also linked into lots of other things in my childhood, were imagination things, creativity things. So I used to watch Fingerbobs, which was all about creating and making imagination with that. Blue Peter, full of making stuff. Itsy and Bitsy, two spiders that like love puppets. That was all making and colouring. Tony Hart with Morph, and that was you know, all arts and stuff. And there was, my whole childhood was full of TV programs like that and using your imagination. My grandma had already stimulated my imagination with playing, you know, shop and stuff with me. So this Storybook International was why I really, you know, really tapped into what I liked, and that's why I picked it as my next song.
I'm the storyteller, and my stories must be told. I have many stories, tales for both the young and old. I have many voices to describe many places. Many names have I, and many faces. In Russia I am Ivan, in Sweden I am Jan. In Germany I'm Johann, in England I am John. From my many travels I have gathered these tales to teach you good sense when all else fails. Sometimes there are tears, sometimes there is laughter, but always a happily ever after.
So you got this life where it sounds just full of play and imagination and being a rebel. And this sounds, you know, like perfect in my world. I just can't wait to meet you in real life. And I just wondered how your husband coped with you.
I don't think he even knows how he copes with me now.
But you've clearly got a very deep love between you. And I thought you might tell us about the next piece of music.
The next piece of music is When I Fall in Love by Nat King Cole. Simply because when we were 17, or when I was 17, we started dating. You know, after a while, people say, "Oh, well, what's your song?" You know, and people have a love song or something. We didn't really have one, because some people meet at dances and stuff, so that becomes their song. So we picked When I Fall in Love by Nat King Cole to be our song, simply because it says, when I fall in love, it will be forever, or I'll never fall in love. In a restless world like this love is ended before it's begun, and too many moonlight kisses seem to cool in the warmth of the sun. When I give my heart, it will be completely, or I'll never give my heart. And the moment I can feel that you feel that way too is when I fall in love with you. And the moment I can feel that, when, you know, it says it again, I'll fall in love with you. So as I was saying before, both sets of our parents have had long marriages. My parents had long marriages, and Richard's parents had long marriages as well. But even in those days, the current way seemed to be that you stay with a partner for a year or two. Then when the shine kind of wears off, you assume that you've fallen out of love, and then you split up. And people kind of think that love is a kind of feeling and an emotion all of the time. And half of the time, love's a decision. You know, you make a decision to love someone and to commit to someone. And the actual love feeling is, it kind of comes and goes, but it doesn't mean you've stopped loving them, you know. Also, Richard and myself are Christians. We don't hold with sex before marriage. So we were together for 4 years before we got married, and therefore our relationship wasn't based on sex. It stood outside of sex. So we were prepared that if sex dies off in the marriage, which marriages do, you know, even if it's super passionate at the beginning, it naturally kind of goes, you know, like a lot less, and sometimes just stops, that we would still have a relationship, you know, even having children, you know, and the usual things that get in the way of sex in a marriage, that can, you know, kind of take that side of it out. We were still friends. We've got a lot of shared stuff that we like doing together, and we knew that, you know, if sex ceased or didn't happen or got worse, we would still enjoy being together and the companionship of being together for our lives. So that's why this is our song, really. It will be forever when I fall in love.
When I fall in love, it will be forever. Or I'll never fall in love. In our restless world, like this is. Love is ended before it's begun, and too many moonlight kisses seem to cool in the warmth of the sun. When I give my heart, it will be completely.
So you're in a band, and you've just done a great performance.
Yeah, I'm in a brass band.
Tell us about it.
I have, yeah. That's the performance that I did with the band is linked into a song that's coming up in a few minutes, so I'll tell you about that at that particular time. This particular song now is Solitaire, which is a soprano cornet solo by Brian Evans, and he was a really good, soprano cornet player. I've been in the school brass band probably from the age of about 13 until I left school at 15 or 16 or something like that. And I didn't really want to play a cornet, or I wasn't no interest in brass instruments, because guitar was my thing. That's what I learned at primary, and I started to do guitar at secondary school as well. But I had a friend who joined the school band, and she kept nagging me, come along, you'll enjoy it and everything. And I thought, okay, why not? But I didn't join until at least year 2 or year 3, so probably, like I say, 12 and 13. Started off on the B flat cornet, and by the end of the time there, I was on the soprano cornet. And there's only one soprano cornet in a band. It's the highest instrument. It's the E flat, and it's a bit of an icing on the cake. Everyone hears the soprano cornet, so it suited my personality quite well. Because I like to stand out. So I'd had quite a big gap between playing. When I left school, I did play a little bit in some church music groups, but the instrument doesn't really fit that well there because it's not the right key. So I kind of stopped playing completely for about 30 years. Then when our first adopted son moved in, I took him to a training band when he turned 6 and his teeth were in place enough. You got to wait for children's teeth to all come in. I thought I'll give him the chance to learn music, see if he likes it as much as me. He might not, but I wanted to expose him to that chance. So I took him to a training band, and rather than sit there for the hour, I thought I might as well help out. So I started playing. And when he'd lost all interest, in about 6 months after we started, I got really back into playing again. And I'd started to play with the senior band, the main band. And Solitaire was the first solo that I've ever played with a brass band. And that's why I picked this particular piece, by a soprano cornet.
So you have a massive love of music, and it sounds as though it's been throughout your whole life and still is. And I wondered if you'd tell us about your next track.
Well, the next track is a famous ABBA song, Thank You for the Music, which I think everybody from, no matter how old or young you are, has heard it or knows it at some point, even our children. And of course, you know, it says, thank you for the music, the songs I'm singing, thanks for all the joy they're bringing. Who can live without it? I ask in all honesty, what would life be? Without a song or a dance, what are we? So I say, thank you for the music, for giving it to me. Thank you for the music, for giving it to me. And music is absolutely massive in my life, and always has been. Not just the making of music, but listening to it. You know, music can be such a mood changer. If you can feel down in the dumps and you put on a happy, bright song, and before you know it, your spirit's lifted. And it can do the opposite. You know, it can set the mood. It can set, you know, a somber tone. It's so powerful. But my reason really for picking this song, not just for the gratitude, my personal gratitude to music and what it means to me, is more for what it meant to me and my mum and the relationship that we had. She used to always be carrying around a radio in the old days with batteries in it, you know, before portable things came. And wherever we went, she'd take this radio and a couple of sandwiches, and we sat on Blackpool Beach, and she'd have some radio music on and stuff. So when she got dementia in the last part of her life, and my dad had died, and so we took her into our house, and eventually she had to go into a care home. Music was the one thing that still connected me to her, even when she didn't always know who I was, because sometimes I'd go to her, I recorded music, mainly to a backing track, you know, like, and I played a tune over the top, and she'd always ask me all of my life, make me a tape, you know, a mixtape, make me a tape. And I said, I'll do that one day, Mum, and never got around to it. But of course, in the dementia, I did. I recorded so much music for her. And I'd play it to her when she was in the care home. I'd play it on a speaker, and she'd be like, oh, my daughter plays the cornet. And I'd be like, yeah, I do, Mum, you know. And so even though she didn't always know it was me on the thing, she was appreciating the music. And also when COVID came, and we were locked out of the care homes, and we had to talk through windows and cracks in doors. That was useless for me and my mum, because she couldn't hear me anyway. She couldn't understand why I was stuck outside and they wouldn't let me in. She didn't understand COVID and all the rest of it. So the fact I play cornet and we had the music connection was amazing, because I set myself up outside of her window with a music stand, with a pop-up tent to protect me from the rain, and played just music out there for her. And everyone on the street was like thinking, what's this weird woman doing outside this care home? I thought, I don't care what people think. This is for me and my mum, and that's the most important thing. And so, you know, literally on the very day of her death, we stayed with her the whole day. She was kind of incoherent, but she was still singing. She was singing what she thought was tunes, and we were joining in. And all the way in that last few hours of her dying, I was playing to her not just my music, but things that she knew, like Elvis Presley and all the old singers and stuff, and thine be the glory, you know, and Christian songs as well. So that's why I'm grateful for music, because at the end of my mum's life, that was the one thing that I still had, where I could reach her and make her happy.
I've been so lucky. I am the girl with golden hair. I wanna sing it out to everybody. What a joy, what a life, what a chance. Thank you for the music, the songs I'm singing. Thanks for all the joy they're bringing. Who can live without it? I ask
us now about the brass band that you're in and the performance you've just done and why you've picked this piece of music.
So the next piece is Florentina March, which is actually played by Grindthorpe Colliery Band, which featured in the Brassed-Off, film on the TV. Which again, even people who don't like brass bands, I think a lot of them have seen Brassed-Off and appreciated it because of all the political, side of what it represents. And our band, which is Stalybridge Old Band, recently performed a Brassed-Off or in Brassed-Off at Guybridge Theatre, where I think it was the Hyde Little Theatre company. The actors and actresses were from Hyde Little Theatre, and it was an amazing experience because I've never done anything like that before. The director had never worked with a brass band before, so he didn't know how to take us. He didn't know how to speak to us, but he loved it, because everyone was so friendly and we were friendly to him. I love the film anyway because it's about community and about what is generally a cheap hobby, banding. And the fact that obviously music's a mood changer. It can help you regulate the stresses of life. And in their dire situation where the collieries were closing and everything was taken away, their whole livelihoods, they still kept that backbone of music. It's almost like the chain gangs when they used to sing, to keep the spirits up when they were in the slavery. It's a kind of defiance to say, everything else is falling apart around me, but this I will still do, and this is what's going to, change my mood. So Florentina March, not that the reason I picked that particular song is it's got a lot of soprano cornet in it. It was my feature. So, I thought I better do this right because people have paid for tickets to see this. It got a full theatre. It was maxed out, and most of the time I think I mostly got my bit right in it.
Great. Wonderful. Let's take a listen. So we've got one more track to listen to, Greta. Tell us why you picked this one.
So the next one is Amazing Grace, and it's sung by Judy Collins. And absolutely love this. This is a kind of, definitely we're having this at my funeral if I get to tell them what I want. And it's the kind of thing that I think probably might have sung it at our wedding, probably sung it at my dad's funeral, because it says, when we've been there in heaven for 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, with no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. And I take this, to the desert island with me because the bottom line is that no matter who we've got in our life, your husband, your children, your parents, we all die. And all those relationships, no matter how wonderful they are or have been, will end. And either, death will end it because they've died or you yourself dies. And, being a Christian, I don't believe that death is the end of all things. And I love that song because it speaks of eternity. And it speaks that even after 10,000 years, which as humans, you can't even imagine living for 10,000 years, that there is still no less days to sing God's praise. And when you think, try to imagine eternity, and it just goes on and on and on and on and never, ever, ever stops. You kind of get that tickle in your stomach, you know, like when you go down a hill and your stomach kind of stays behind, or a big roller coaster. When I try and think that, because as humans, just imagine something never stopping, because, you know, everything stops and starts, but this never will. This absolute glorious paradise for ever and ever, where my parents are, you know, and where my husband will be and stuff, you know. So that's why I've picked this is my final song, Amazing Grace by Judy Collins.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
So how do you think you'll fare on this island, Greta?
I think I'll do pretty well. I like my own company. I've got a great imagination, so I will be making coconut friends, and I will be making plant people to talk to, and I will be, you know, making my own music and enjoying my own company and enjoying peace and quiet, you know. So yeah, as long as I get a nice amount of sunshine and a bit of a place to have some shade, I think I'll do really well on a desert island by myself.
Great. And if you could only take one of the discs that you've chosen today, which one would it be and why?
I think it probably would be the Amazing Grace one, because of the fact that that's the bottom line. You know, I love the life that I've got, that I've had, and that I hopefully will have. I love the people that I've got in my life, and I'm blessed to have a long marriage, you know, which people just don't have nowadays. And all those things are great and wonderful, but they will end. Those relationships will end, whereas my relationship with God never will end. So that would be definitely my track, the Amazing Grace track.
And you're allowed so we send you away with the Bible and the complete works of Shakespeare, and you're allowed to take another book of your choice. What would you choose?
Right, okay. Well, I don't know, because I'm not. I mean, I like I say, I love storytelling and Enid Blyton and stuff like that. But right now, I've just started reading a book that someone's recommended to me, and it's really piqued my interest. And it's something like Women Who Walk with Wolves by some lady whose name I don't remember, but it sounds very foreign, like very Czechoslovakian or something. So I would be taking that book right now, because I've just started reading it the other day, and it's a thick book. It's going to take me a while to read. So that's the one that I would take, my book.
And you also get to take a luxury. What would your luxury be?
My luxury item would be, originally I thought, you know, perhaps a photo album, but if I was going to live the rest of my life on a desert, I would, away from my family, I'd want my cornet, definitely. But I decided I'd compromise and I'd stick a photo of my family on the end of the cornet. So I'd have the best of both worlds.
Greta, thank you so much for letting us listen to your Desert Island discs.
You're welcome. Thank you.